This episode of Tekzilla is sponsored by Domain.com and Netflix. Coming up on this episode, we got a special guest host, Liana Lehua from Girls Gone Geek. Jim Lauterbach brings us the scoop from Demo Systems' very own David Randolph is not working on the studio. He's here with a MacBook Air. USB turntables. You asked if they were any good, so we've been testing. Pops and clicks and hisses, clean them out with Bias SoundSoap, and the most amazing free audio tool ever. Seems to be an audio-centric show, doesn't it? Well, wait till we get to the viewer questions. It's today's Tekzilla. Welcome to Tekzilla. I'm your host, Patrick Norton.
And I'm your guest host, Liana Lehua.
We got a great show lined up for you today. Coming up, USB turntables, yes or no, the MacBook Air purchased and reviewed by a PC guy. We're going to turn your car window into a tripod, and as always, a stack of your viewer questions. But before we begin, you might not be familiar with Liana, but you should know her voice. She's a producer and one of the stars of the Girls Gone Geek podcast. Now, Liana, what exactly is a Girls Gone Geek podcast?
Girls Gone Geek podcast, we get to sit and chat. It's me and four of my friends, and we talk about technology, how it relates to our lives. And a lot of questions that we get are around, is it a show just for girls? And it's not, actually. So, you know, you heard the other Girls Gone stuff, and it's definitely for everybody, but it's just us and talking about technology as it applies to our lives. So it's just a little bit different than being really techie, like hands-on and hacking everything.
Well, I mean, you get pretty hands-on. I mean, I've heard you talk about encryption on the show, and it's not like you're like, you know, it's a little in-depth.
I enjoy it. I mean, we're lucky in that we get to pick our own, all of the girls, we pick our own topics. And so because I like that stuff, I try to share the stuff that I love with the audience. And because the cast is so varying and different levels, it's nice because they ask questions that I might like completely kind of geek out, and then they'll kind of go, hey, wait a second, what's that? So it's a good balance.
What's on the last show, the last episode of the show? The
last episode, we always do picks for some of our favorite websites and music, because one of our hosts really likes music. And then I cover some different things, like I covered the Lens Baby, which is my favorite new toy. Like if anybody's into photography, the Lens Baby is like so
pointing
fun.
The end of your camera. It's a little trippy.
Yeah, it's like a lens that you can manipulate the front of it, but it's a really focused camera with a shallow depth of field. And so you really have to like take the time to figure out what you want to photograph before you capture it. But some of the images are so amazing. Like it's a really cool toy to have. I haven't put it down yet, actually.
Really? A lot of close-ups.
So it's fun. Yes, a lot of close-ups. So just random things like shoes. Like who needs to look at like a close-up of shoes? But cool stuff.
Everybody that's been buying on Zappos,
yes.
And there's a lot of you in the audience.
Right.
Do you want to fire up the viewer
Zappos
stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. If you download the QuickTime HD version of the show, you might have noticed some maybe hiccups in last week, but trust me, we got your mail.
Team IT says, oops, our bad. They're currently testing out new encoding settings. They used the wrong settings on last show, and they are re-encoding them. And they want to apologize for the ugly video and thank you for your support of their continuing efforts to deliver the best quality video with the least amount of download time for you. And you know what? That's not the only thing you guys have been writing about. Liana, you want to do us the honor of firing off the viewer comments?
Thank you.
You're
awesome.
welcome.
So last week we talked about no thumbnail views in OS X. We got a ton of emails in response to Patrick's comments about the lack of thumbnail views. Last week from Lance, Roger, Peter, Austin, Eli, and quite a few other folks. Quite a few wrote in about the fancy cover flow view in Leopard. It's like tuning album covers in iTunes. And unfortunately, Patrick isn't running the latest version of OS X, and neither am I. But you can all preview all the JPEG photos in a folder with a couple tweaks to OS X. You'll see how next week on a Tekzilla Daily Tip.
Cool.
Very helpful.
Actually, yes. I want to thank everybody who actually wrote in the directions for that one, because I've been whining about this for years and nobody pointed this out. And I also want to say, while we're on the subject, I'm using a MacBook Pro at work and a MacBook, which is my primary notebook at home, and then I got a Vista and an XP desktop at home. So quit saying I'm a Mac basher, because I use Macs every day at home and at work. And actually, I use Vista and XP every day at home and at work, but it's complicated. Just anyhow. Whatever. I don't even want to go there. Our second comment comes from Adam in Australia, writes in, I saw the latest Tekzilla that you were interested in seeing inside of a Toslink switcher. That's an optical audio switcher. Here's some pics of the inside of a whopping $15 Australian dollar version. $15 Australian one I had sitting around the house. It's surprisingly less complicated than I imagined it would be. And Adam's writing in from Sydney. Thanks for sharing, man. Because that way I don't break something for a change, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I know how you feel about that. It's like I like getting those corrections. It's very helpful. So always put me back on the right track because I forget sometimes. So thanks to everyone for sending in your comments and your questions. We want more of them, definitely. So if you want to get something off your chest or just show us something cool, you can email us at tekzilla@revision3.com. Patrick?
Let's take a moment to thank one of the sponsors that pays our bills, Netflix. I don't care if you're HD, DVD, or Blu-ray, chances are your local rental store has bupkis for HD rentals. Yes, I'm getting my Yiddish on today. If you're looking for a steady supply of HD titles, Blu-ray or HD, Netflix will mail them to you. And that's on top of the bazillions of obscure anime titles and big Hollywood flicks my old roommate had streaming into our house on an almost daily basis. If you're suffering for videos or just can't find what you want locally, you can get a free trial at netflix.com/Tekzilla. Like the dudes on the porch used to say, thank you for your support. My life is a never-ending hunt for useful gadgetry, and every so often I find something worth cramming into the backpack of doom. Case in point, this thing. This is Petco's UltraClamp. Now, if I'd actually had one of these on the great cross-country trip to my cousin's wedding last summer, I'd have actually been in some of the pictures. Called a universal window clamp, though it'll fit just about anything that you can cram in between the 1.5 inch the jaws hold. Pipes, fence posts, and yes, you can turn your car window into a set of sticks. It's built like a brick outhouse, extruded aluminum, pretty heavy-duty plastic, and a pair of ball and socket joints. So I'm going to continue to crank this thing down on our bucket of doom here, which takes a while sometimes to crank it down if you've got a thin wall like this. We've got it clamped down, and we have a standard 1/4x20 thread count, which I probably should have put on here before we attached it. And then we got a pair of ball joints in here, so you can pretty much move it and lock it down in any position you want, such as this one towards the camera, towards the ceiling. We can pop it down, we can move it over. It works shockingly well, and actually works really well with car windows. Holds 4 pounds, 6 if you push it, so super huge lenses won't work, but a 200, 300 millimeter lens shouldn't be a problem. Made in the USA if you're into that. $24 at pedcopods.com, though I did find mine locally here in San Francisco at an outdoor store. So if you're looking for a way to have something stable to attach your camera to, it's really great if you're shooting at night or if you want to stand in the picture with your family without putting it on the hood of your car and everybody crouching. Check it out, UltraClamp. Joining us now, this is kind of scary, the man responsible for the very set and the studio we're standing in right now, Mr. David Randolph. Mr. Randolph hates Macs, but recently found himself compelled to buy a MacBook Air. You despise OS X.
I despise OS X, but I love their hardware.
Really?
That's kind of the difference. As soon as you get Boot Camp running, any Mac's a great computer.
Or a great PC. Does it pain you to admit how much you enjoy the Apple hardware?
It does pain me quite a bit, to be honest with you, but I've learned to live with my suffering.
Because you're one of the only people, it's like you and our CEO, Jim Lauterbach, are both running like Dell notebooks, or you running a Dell desktop, he's running a Dell notebook, you've got several PCs. I have several PCs at home, but why did you decide, it was that pretty?
It was that pretty, and I had some money to burn. I had no practical application for it other than it's thin. I already have, the Sony Vaio, the ultra mobile PC that they actually sell.
Which has what, 8, maybe 12 minutes of battery life?
Actually, I got the extended one, which the battery itself weighs more than the actual Air.
That's the little slidey one. Do you actually, unlike the ultra mobile PC, can you actually use the keyboard on this one?
Yes, you can actually use the keyboard. In fact, one of the funny things is that I like this keyboard better than the MacBook Pros. The keys actually dip in the middle, so that it feels a lot better on your fingers. It's a lot tighter, and I like the black layout.
It has a good feel.
It has a good feel for it.
And it doesn't glow at you in the dark.
This actually does glow.
Oh, really?
Yes, they are backlit displays on them, as well as the trackpad is actually considerably larger on this than the MacBook Pros. Not to mention the multi-touch, which I've already gotten addicted to on this thing.
So I suspect there's a downside to the MacBook Air.
Yes, there is absolutely no ports on that thing whatsoever.
No, there's a port over here. Two ports.
There's one USB port, which is already taken up by an Ethernet dongle. Then the other port over there is the mini DVI, or the micro DVI as they call it, so you can plug in a second display.
They pretty much use that on all their notebooks.
Right. But the problem is that you run out of USB ports real quick, because one isn't enough. And it doesn't have a lot of power, so I cannot plug in like a pocket drive and an Ethernet adapter into an unpowered USB hub. So now I find myself carrying this USB hub plus a power supply everywhere.
So you're saying it's if you actually want to do something other than sort of type and directly compute on the screen, it can be a little frustrating?
Right. Also, you are stuck with the battery life of about 4 to 5 hours. I'm getting about 4 hours runtime on it.
That's not too bad. That's better than the MacBook Pros by a long shot.
That's way better than that, but you can't change out the batteries like everybody knows.
How many times have you bought a new battery for a notebook?
Well, from actual wear and tear, a lot, but from the actual just like wearing it down,
right?
I haven't had to do that yet.
Because people are like, my God, there's not a usable, replaceable battery on that notebook. It's ridiculous. How could? And I've met one person who's actually ever bought a replacement battery for a notebook after wearing it out.
And yeah, it's rare that you're going to keep a computer for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, usually the notebook disintegrates before the battery wears out.
Or you drop it and smash the screen.
You were having some issues with the power cord too.
Yes, that was a big problem. The MacBook Pros.
I don't know if we can see this.
The way the magnetic latch works on them, it's real easy to stick those in, but on these, you pretty much have to flip it over upside down to get it to line up right, because the magnet's so strong it will actually make it lock in without actually sitting in the socket.
Yeah, it's making, there we go. That's in the socket, and that's not in the socket.
So when I'm sitting there, in the coffee shop trying to impress the ladies, it's a little hard. You have to kind of flip it over to plug it in to try and find the power adapter.
That's part of the Kevin Rose school. Buy the new Apple products, sit in a coffee shop, and have you.
I'm this close to wearing the wool cap.
That's it. Would you buy it again?
Yeah, it runs Boot Camp really well. Windows XP runs great. The biggest problem that I found, actually, I'll say the biggest compliment that I have is that the multi-touch touch, and that's why Boot Camp is so great.
I didn't do this intentionally. That's the equivalent of a blue screen on OS X.
But no, the multi-touch, the 2-finger salute on the keyboard is your right click in Windows.
Right.
So it's really nice. The biggest pain I had is there's no Ethernet drivers under Boot Camp for this.
Ah, that's a bummer. And there's no Ethernet port.
And there's no Ethernet port, so if you're trying to get it hooked up, you're kind of screwed.
So you're going to have to be using like Wi-Fi or nothing at all.
Right, exactly.
But you like it though, don't you?
I like it. I'm going to keep on using it.
So it's a gateway product.
It's a gateway product. I mean, before you know it, I'll have an iPhone and, oh wait,
Yeah. How many iPhones have you on?
I'm on number 3.
We want to thank Mr. Randolph for joining us. And if you want to read Dave's detailed personal account of this machine, check out the show notes. We got them at Tekzilla.com or revision3.com/Tekzilla. Or if you want to email Dave and ask him more about the MacBook Air, please, Tekzilla@revision3.com. Now, just last week, geeks gathered in Palm Springs for Demo 2008, the, and I quote, premier launch venue for new products, technologies, and companies. We're not on the list, we never will be, but our very own CEO, Jim Lauterbach, has been going there for years. He's on the list. Here's our pick of what debuted at the show.
So here's the problem. You got all these devices, you got computers, you've got files and folders at home, but you got a firewall, so you can't actually access that stuff at home when you're out somewhere else. And if you try and set up one of these cameras, if you've ever done it, one of these surveillance cameras, it's impossible to actually see it from anywhere else without paying someone a lot of money. Well, that's what this company Yikes is trying to solve. They've got this new software program that it's basically VPN made easy, and it turns anything, virtually anything, into a little web server. So what happens is you load it up on your desktop, this computer, and you take a folder or anything else, drag it in here, and turn it into what they call a device. So these are all different folders that have been shared inside this Yikes interface, and they could be from anywhere, computers all over the world. And what they do is, rather than opening up a port on your router or doing one of those things to try and give you access to it, they have this secret sauce which they wouldn't explain to me in any detail, so I really don't understand how it works. But basically they allow you to go in there in an encrypted way and then get access to any of these things behind the firewall at home, wherever you might be. And not just on computers either. So, I've got stuff shared here, and some of the guys working the company, these are actually coming from their homes in Palo Alto or wherever. You can get a web interface, so you see right over here, we've got a web interface where those same things, whether it's demo, pics, or home surveillance, you can click on one of these. I have no idea what this is, but as I click on it, it'll bring it up, and it'll bring up this home surveillance cameras right here, and that's somebody's house. We're in Palm Springs, and that looks like it's probably Palo Alto or something. I can see that white car out there, nobody's broken into it using cameras like this. But the other neat thing is, take a look at this. That also works on the iPhone. So I've got those same pictures right here on the iPhone that I have there, and those are all coming from somebody's house behind a firewall in the middle of nowhere, well, Palo Alto. And really kind of a cool way to, as they say, as easy as instant messaging, take a folder, take a device, take anything that can live on a network and make it shareable and accessible without worrying about firewalls and other things in a way that you can easily access anywhere. Now think about the security. Okay, you get a username and a password, but that's it. As long as you don't tell anybody your username and password, all your stuff will be safe. So you better choose a good password when you use it. Yoiks, Y-O-I-C-S, available now in beta. Check it out, and if you want to get your files when you're on the road or at work or wherever, this could work for you. Now, one scary thing that they told me, though, is that because they work outside of the traditional types of security, it pretty much works anywhere. And there was a guy at, I don't know, it was the Department of Defense or some really secret government place, set this up and compromised the security. So we'll see how that all works. If you're in business, you might not want to tell people about this. But for everybody else, check it out.
Thanks, Jim. Folks, there was quite a bit more at Demo, and you can check out their website at demo.com to see some of the other folks that were in attendance displaying their new wares at the show. And after the break, USB turntables, or how to get vinyl in your PC the easy way, plus this week's free download, all coming up when Tekzilla returns. Free software does not suck, so we try to pack something free in every episode. This week's free software pick is Audacity. It's a free open source audio editor that runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux, though I gotta say, I've never run it on Linux. Records audio up to 32-bit, 96 kilohertz, supports up to 16 channels simultaneously if you've got the hardware. You can edit, cut, copy, paste, delete, change pitch without changing the tempo, and you've got unlimited undo and redo. Support for Ogg Vorbis, MP3 Wave, and AIF, though you'll need Lame for MP3 export. You can remove hum, hiss, or static. Your basic constant background noise is not so good with the clicks and pops, and it even supports plugins that you might know from other more expensive audio editing software. No support for WMA or AAC, but hey, export to a WAV, then make one in Windows Media Player or iTunes. 1.2.6 is the stable version. If you like life on the edge, try the 1.3.4 beta. It's got a ton of new features, but it might just crash.
Well, while we're on the subject of audio, a while back, Tekzilla did a spot on converting vinyl records to digital audio.
I was
and a lot
out.
of viewers. Oh,
Yes. My wife had just had a child,
yes,
so I missed that one.
Nice. That was a very cool thing, though. I mean, very necessary. Like I've got a bunch of stuff hooked up too to be able to do it, but this is going to be really cool.
To have a kid or to capture?
Oh,
audio
to capture
from vinyl?
audio. I got to wait on the other stuff. Yeah.
So you've got a thing that's hooked up?
Yeah, I got a thing.
You're not
You just
carrying
do it.
it?
Yeah, I know.
There's a
It's pretty
segment
good, huh?
there.
There
You gotta
is.
come back and tell us
I got
about
some
that.
money. I'm gonna have to do that. Make it work. But people wanted a lot of emails, and people did a spot on converting vinyl records to digital audio. And after it, a lot of viewers did write in and ask why we didn't use a USB turntable. And now, as I understand it, Patrick, you've been testing a couple different models, and what have you found out?
Well, okay, the reason we didn't use a USB turntable, right, which is essentially a regular old turntable with a USB analog to digital converter built into the back, right? So basically, you've got a line or a phono output on the back, but what they basically do is allow you to directly plug it into your computer via a USB connection. So essentially a USB turntable is just a turntable with USB built into it, USB audio converter. I didn't use one because I already own a pretty decent turntable, and I own a phono preamp that does the RAAA equalization. And it seemed silly to me to go out and buy another turntable when we already had one that worked. Right. But like you said before, a bunch of people wrote in asking about these USB turntables, and are they any good? And actually, they're better than I expected. I wasn't really impressed with this one right here, which is Ion's TT USB 10. It's about $199. The build quality on it is not what you would call robust. It's essentially plastic. Yeah, actually, pick it up. It's like it weighs nothing, including the platter itself. It's not a direct drive turntable. Basically, there's a rubber band that turns the table, and the audio quality was not the best, and there was a little bit of detectable background noise. They do the TT USB 05. You want a cheap, inexpensive turntable. You don't want to deal with connecting to your audio card. You want the ease of use of USB in, because basically it just shows up as an input in your sound card selections. Go for the USB 05. It's $100. Spend $40 and upgrade the cartridge on it. The cartridge is the part that holds the needle. It's the cool bits deep down inside of it, and upgrade the cartridge on it. And I think that's a nice low end way to go. That'll get you in for like $150. Now, if you don't have a turntable and you want to do something more high-end, we also checked out this device from Stanton, which is the TDOT 90 USB turntable. I'm going to slide that one forward.
Sure.
Notice it's
This is a little bit more weighty for sure.
yeah, it's a direct drive turntable, which is considered kind of the best way of doing it. We
Nice
have
cozy.
Yeah, do you like the turntable
dig that.
cozy? I was laughing about that. A copy of Minor Threat, Minor Threat's second album. Please don't yell at me for putting it down there. It's not an original version. It's a direct drive turntable, which is kind of like considered the best way. It's the professional way. It's essentially a DJ turntable, and the construction's a lot more heavy duty. You can basically check, you've got the, I should have plugged this in basically, you have the ability to check the speed. It does 78 along with 33s and 45s, and then you've got all the DJ stuff like pitch lock, start, stop, reverse, or if you just record an album backwards instead of just reversing it inside of Audacity.
Secret messages.
It's very secret messages. A lot more expensive. It's about $300, but this is a very solid turntable.
Sure. What are we looking at prices and the differences between these two models here?
So this one sells for $200. USB TT USB 10 is going to sell for about $200. They do a version of it that has a couple fewer features. It doesn't have. They like to have a little 1/8" audio input on this, so you can use the onboard DAC. I'd go for the USB 05, which is about $100, and upgrade the cartridge. This Stanton is a big step up. It's about $300. Excuse me, but the audio quality was a bit better. I found a little bit less noise. The levels were a lot lower, but it seemed to be a little more solid. I'm sure it's going to turn out to actually have the same exact DAC inside of it, or analog to digital converter. But we basically pulled out. I hid my albums because I actually wanted to listen to something, because most of the stuff I listen to is like punk, and I love Minor Threat, but you're not really you're not getting a lot of nuanced audio in there. So we got like the full 180 gram pressing of a John Coltrane album, and these are kind of crazy. These are the new albums they're doing that are the audio file, and they're heavy.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because the idea is you're
vinyl.
increasing the mass. You've got the.
That's nice.
And it's funny. I mean, it's really fun to just it's been like years. Well, it's been since the last time I actually captured a bunch of audio that I heard the whole needle on the record kind of sound. Yeah. But you know what? This is like anything else. You get what you pay for.
Yeah. Yeah, so what would you recommend with these? I know you kind of mentioned a little bit about sound cards too. Unless you've got some really, really old computer, you can use them with any kind of computer. So would you recommend at the end of the day getting one of these versus
if you've got
analog?
if you've got a regular turntable, right? To connect it to your computer, you're going to need what they call an RIA preamp. You can get a pretty decent one for about $45, and then you can just plug it into the stereo inputs on your sound card. If you don't own a turntable, then I would, and you can't borrow one. If you can borrow a turntable, borrow it. If you don't own a turntable or you need to buy one, I would suggest spending a little extra money. Go for the Stanton. I wasn't real thrilled. Basically, if you don't have the golden ears, you don't think you're going to hear it, go for the USB 05 from Ion. That's as cheap as you're going to get to convert to analog or to convert vinyl to digital. If you're a really serious audio person, then I would spend a little bit more money, go with something like the Stanton T90. And definitely, if you get one of the cheap turntables, spend like $40 and upgrade the cartridge, because I think that's going to be your biggest sort of audio improvement for the least amount of money.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thanks.
Definitely a better solution than what I'm working with right now.
You sound like you got it pretty well wired, though.
Yeah.
What are you using to actually record the audio?
Actually, just recording into, what are we using? I think it was funny because I was playing because I wanted free stuff to work, so I was trying to record into Audacity. But actually, one of my brother's computers has Peak on it, an older version of Peak. But yeah,
that's pretty good software.
We're playing with Peak a little bit, but a little spendy. Audacity will work if you just kind of want to play. So now that you have the LP digitized, how do you clean up the pops and the hisses and the clicks and the noise that comes with the record playback?
Well, it's kind of funny. Even if you have like a brand new, just out of the wrapper record, you clean it, and if you don't get all the dust off, you definitely need to get some snaps in there. Because we're listening to, we've got our super cool 180 gram audiophile grade pressing, and we didn't have. First time I played it, I didn't have, and please don't email me to tell me how silly I am. I didn't have anything to clean it with, but I played it anyway. And of course, you're hearing it's basically the needles hitting the dust, and and it was kind of like, but you've got that good analog experience. There's a lot of stuff you can use. One of the best things, one of the easiest ones I've ever seen was part of a Microsoft Plus pack.
Wow.
It was like this $20 Plus pack, and it had this audio capture tool, and it did everything you really needed to do, which is capture the audio, make it easy to break the files up, and then to label the files, because none of this comes, it's not like, burning a CD, ripping a CD and everything gets labeled. And it did some pretty decent click and pop removal. And one of the things you notice is there's like 32,000 applications that are like, we're the best LP, revitalization tool ever made on a computer. And most of them suck. Most of them were like written in the early 90s. They still look like that. They do really heavy noise compression. One of the cooler ones out there, you can play around with an Audacity, which works really great for like analog tapes, not so good with the clicks and pops, is a program called SoundSoap. And you can use it to remove tape hits, clicks, crackles, buzzings, hum, rumbles, noise. It works on both Windows and Mac, which is really nice. We're on an XP right now, and it runs not just as a standalone application, but as a plugin via DirectX or like a VST host or something called RTAS, which I have no idea what that is. But like anything will take like DirectX plugins or VST plugins, this will actually work as a plugin. So it basically, see if I can actually get it to open something. We're going to open a media file.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking it too, like you said, there's plugins for like iMovie and iDVD if you're on a Mac, and so you can pull the audio in from it and clean it up, and some amazing stuff.
Yeah, they actually use these in our editing bays for some of the shows. So if they have something that gets a tape gets munched or something, they can try to clean up the audio with this. And it's got some pretty cool tools. Like basically, you play around with it, and you basically, it's like you kind of like the off up to more.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Kai's Power Tools interface. It's an experiential interface. It's designed to have you invest your intelligence into the software in a non-traditional manner, which can be really frustrating. Unless you basically embrace playing around with the knobs and seeing what works.
Right. And when you do that, though, like you said, you can really like push the knobs up on some stuff and really kind of overdo it. So like, what happens if you do that?
Well, the thing I've noticed, like I've like, we're gonna hit like preserve voice and learn noise. If you jack everything up to 100%, the more you process stuff, the more you tend to notice it. Because one of the things I've noticed that if you're like there's a pop in something, you're like, I'm gonna make that pop disappear, and you keep throttling up the noise removal, you'll end up with a lot of times with this very sort of grainy, very heavily processed sound.
Right.
So sometimes you need to accept like a little click or a pop or a hiss as part of the experience of transferring this older media onto a new digital platform, because you can make it sound really bad, like vocoder bad, like everything starts to we should actually like run my voice through one of those things over and over again. Don't push it too far.
Yeah, that's like pushing up like the contrast too high on a Photoshop photo.
Exactly.
Overdoing something and it shows up and it doesn't have a natural effect anymore.
Well, I mean, something you definitely want to do is experiment. There's a pretty cool setting called Preserve Voice in there, which allows you to basically avoid hacking at the frequencies where the human voice tends to be most prevalent. And then if you have a noise on thing that you want to remove, you can basically teach it to learn the noise and try to sort of maximize its efficiency at removing a particular chunk of bad audio.
And to do that, you kind of want to make sure that you have enough audio, like maybe 2 to 3 seconds of that for it to learn. Or you can I know that you can loop the sound as well, so it can learn that ambient swing you really want to get rid of.
I gotta say, most of the stuff I've had to deal with, it has been pretty standard pops and clicks, and it does, or like the kind of hiss you would use like a Dolby to remove. So that stuff is pretty done. I'll play around with it some more.
Yeah.
I'll try to find like an ooga or something that I want removed and see what happens. Because usually they're short noises in a lot of cases.
There's a little bit I was noticing too in the window that's in the middle. There's nothing in there now, but visually I remember seeing actually some red and blue, and it was kind of a cool thing because the blue was the sound that you do want and the red was the sound you don't want. So if you needed to remove something, if you couldn't hear it visually, and like I said, sorry, but I remember seeing something, and so the red is just the sound that you kind of want to get rid of, or those frequencies that are not.
I'll be honest with you, most of the stuff I do with this is removing clicks and crackles, and some of the rumble removal is really cool sometimes too if you have some weird low end noises.
Yeah, I know some other software I'd used. If you had something that had like that ambient noise, you needed about a good 2 to 3 seconds like of that sound for it to learn it so that it could get it. Or I think in SoundSoap too, there's a loop feature, so you could like loop a really short thing if it's like a longer like ambient sound.
Will it work if it's like a real fast noise, or do you basically make the fast noise kind of like into a longer version of it?
Yeah, you make it into a longer version of the fast noise.
So basically it's looking for the particular wave.
Yeah, it's looking for the wave, yeah. So it's kind of neat.
Audio's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
All right. So, hey, I want to take a moment to remind you, our loyal viewers, that this spiffy episode of Tekzilla is sponsored by the folks at Domain.com. And Domain.com might not have a race car driver, but they are big supporters of Revision 3, and they've got some serious deals on domain names and hosting. Shop around. They promise us no funky deals, just $8.75 to register a domain, and they'll make that registration private if you drop another $5. Now, don't take my word for it. Price out your next domain at Domain.com versus the other guys and see who's got the best straight-up deal. Type in Tekzilla when you're checking out at Domain.com, and you'll chop 25% off the price of your domains and hosting. That's just $6.71 for a domain name and 25% off every hosting plan they have. It's as good as it gets. Check them out at Domain.com.
All right, Patrick, do you want to answer some viewer email?
Absolutely.
Cool. The first one comes to us from Chris. I'm sure he loves Smurfs too. He writes, I hear you can make a sort of parabolic antenna out of a Pringles can.
True.
Now, I know it can be used for Wi-Fi, he says, but could it be used for cell phones?
Sort
Says
of.
he gets a horrible signal at his school, and a antenna would be very useful from Chris.
All right, Chris. We've been getting a lot of questions lately from people at college that have bad cell phone reception. There's something going on here. A cantenna would work, right? A cantenna is basically, Pringles cantennas suck. Basically, you turn a Pringles can into a very directional Wi-Fi antenna with a length of wire. And you basically, precisely the right length wire at the right location in the can turns the can into an antenna. I've done them with U-Band coffee cans. There's like a dozen different recipes for them out on the web. They all work, and in theory, one would work with your cell phone if you created one that was tuned to the right frequencies for your cell phone, because usually cell phones are like 800 megahertz or 1.9 gigahertz, and a 2.4 gigahertz antenna is not going to work at either of those frequencies. However, you can find probably designs for like the right frequencies for your cell phone. You're just going to have to hunt around online for that.
So it could work.
Could work if you design the right,
Right.
frequency. Our next email comes from Robbie. Robbie says, I just registered a few domain names the other day. I noticed a new private registration option, which is just a few dollars more and hides the who is information. Is this worth the extra money? Well, Robbie, if you've ever had a 2 a.m. phone call from a 14-year-old that was kind of curious about your phone number and what you were doing on a Friday night, yes, private registration can be very valuable. The idea is, and it's not really that new, it's been around for years, right? So I pay an extra fee and they sort of hide, normally you do a who is, and it's like Bob and Bob's phone number and Bob's address and Bob's email address, and it makes it very easy to track people down. Yeah. If you have an unlisted phone number, you probably want private registration. If you think paying extra for an unlisted phone number is frivolous and silly and not necessary, then I'd skip. I mean, is your phone number listed?
It's not, and I do that. I do use private registration on all my domains, just in case. I feel safer. I feel more safe doing that, definitely.
Well,
so
it's kind of, because, if you've ever had somebody like show up at your house, dude, I saw your address was in the phone book, man. It's like, wow, it's Thursday and it's 6 in the morning.
putting that stuff out there. I mean, I know people can find it if they want to, but yeah, it's nice to be able to hide it with the registration, because people do seem to look for it. It's weird.
Yes. It's like, oh, wow, look, it's Liana's phone number.
Yes.
I found it on the internet.
Now that these last emails touch upon a topic that Patrick mentioned on a previous show, 2 gigs versus 4 gigs of system RAM. And Clayton wrote in asking, I'm an OS 10.5 user with 2 gigs of RAM and would like to know if it's worth the money to upgrade to 4 gigs. So then we get a similar question from Mike. Does 4 gigs of RAM, actually having 4 gigs of RAM actually help the performance of your computer over having 2 gigs of RAM?
And the answer is absolutely maybe. And the answer is completely different if you're running like 32-bit Windows XP or Vista than it is if you're running OS 10. Let's take OS 10. OS 10 can actually see and enjoy 4 gigabytes of RAM. And if you're running, if you're emulating XP or Vista, if you're doing huge video editing, audio editing, Photoshop, having the extra RAM can definitely help if you work with huge files or if you're working with emulating another operating system. And then there's the Windows side, where there's often hardware issues in there. Basically, it's hardware, software, design, history. man, 32-bit operating systems can generally only use up to about 3 gigabytes of RAM, and the rest of it is taken up for hardware I/O addressing. You need an actual 64-bit operating system like 64-bit Vista or Linux or OS 10. I think OS 10 is 64-bit. It always gets confusing to actually see 4 gigabytes and use 4 gigabytes above. You can install 4 gigabytes on almost any machine. So a lot of times only 2 gigabytes or 3 gigabytes, 3.5 gigabytes max will be recognized.
Right. And then depending upon what apps you're running as well, sometimes
Yeah.
too, certain apps like top out at certain like usage. I know, for example, like hardly used, but After Effects is something that I use. It maxes out at 3 gigs. So regardless
really?
of, I have 16 gigs in my system for rendering and that kind of thing, like live preview, 3 gigs. So it doesn't really matter what you can.
Stinks.
Yeah.
So basically, you
So-
have 16 gigs.
Well,
in
no,
just-
I was
okay.
just saying if I had. That's the wishful thinking, hoping one day that I would have. I don't know
like,
what
wow.
for, but
Can I
know.
render at your house? That's awesome. But, on PCs, get a pair of 1 gigabyte sticks and like 2 512 megabyte sticks if you got 4 memory slots, or like 2 1 gigabyte sticks if you got 2. It's tough. OS 10, throw as much memory as if you can if you work with big files. 2 gigabytes is pretty much the sweet. I don't think anybody expected memory to get so cheap so quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it was really expensive just to go to 512. This was a long time ago, but.
Yeah, it was painfully expensive. Yeah, and on Windows XP, 2 gigabytes is the sweet spot for most people. Hey, do us a favor. If you've got a question, a suggestion, a comment, pics of some kind of outrageous tech setup, do us a favor, send them on in. The address, as always, is Tekzilla at revision3.com. And don't forget to check out previous episodes of Tekzilla. They're just waiting to be rewatched at revision3.com/Tekzilla. And we are in the market for a new female co-host. If you got any ideas or live in the San Francisco Bay Area and you want to try out yourself, do us a favor. Send your resume and your headshot to Roger, that's our producer, Roger at revision3.com with Tekzilla co-host in the subject line. More details are available on the website. Oh man, so we're doing laser alarms on the next show. We get like DIY home security. You live in a big urban metropolis. Do you have an alarm system?
I don't right now have an alarm system. My alarm system is the deadbolt.
It's okay. Deadbolts are good.
I need a dog.
A big dog and cages, and it's actually pretty trippy. One of the things we saw at CES, it's a do-it-yourself alarm system, so we're installing that. Plus, actually, we're going to be talking about updating firmware through Linux, or can you actually update firmware through Linux and how you do that, and how to roll your own virtual private network, and viewer questions. Lots of viewer questions.
Very nice. Yeah, tune into that for sure.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been
Will you
fun.
come back next time you're in town?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
Love
Hey,
you.
I want to thank Liana. Actually, we're just doing that. We want to thank Liana again for stopping by and helping out. And don't forget to catch Girls Gone Geek at girlsgonegeek.tv. That is girlsgonegeek.tv. Until next time, you've been watching Tekzilla. I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Liana Lehua.
Thanks again.
Thank you.